Look at this thing. It's beautiful. This is a crystal clear ice sphere, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make one using simple household items and pretty basic techniques. Thanks so much for joining me in today's episode. Let's get started. It's iced tea, by the way. Okay, so let's talk about how we're going to make these awesome clear ice spheres using this insulated mug, some Christmas ornaments, some Play-Doh, and some silicone. Sounds like a super strange combination of things, I know, but it's actually super easy to make. So to start off with, let's quickly talk about what makes ice freeze clear. So you see, when ice freezes, it pushes all the impurities and small air bubbles that's inside the water out away from where it freezes from. That's why in a normal ice cube, the center is cloudy, because it froze evenly from all sides, so all the air bubbles and impurities got pushed in towards the center. So it's actually pretty easy to make clear ice. If you were to take this insulated cup, fill it up with water and put it in a freezer, since it's insulated from all the sides, it would freeze from top to bottom. That would mean that about half of it would come out crystal clear, because all sides but the top are insulated. So in order to get a clear ice sphere, instead of just a cup-shaped block of ice, we need to make a mold. And we're going to make that mold inside of this cup. So that when the water freezes, inside of this mold, it freezes from top to bottom, pushing all the impurities all the way down to the bottom. And in order to not get a sphere with all the impurities at the bottom of it, we're going to leave some extra room in the bottom of the cup that will fill with water, so that when the sphere freezes, it will freeze all the way through and then push the impurities down into the water below it. If that sounds complicated, trust me, it really isn't. It's actually super easy to make, and I'll leave a link to all the things that you'll need down in the description below. So let's get started making this. So since we're going to use silicone to make this mold, we need something to make a mold of. And for that, I picked up these super inexpensive Christmas ornaments. They're like two halves that just simply snap together. I think you're meant to fill these with stuff and then hang them on your tree. These come in all sorts of different sizes, so you can really make any size you want. You can also make different shapes. The process would be exactly the same. So we'll start with the bottom of the cup and then work our way up. So you remember I said in the beginning that we need to have water in the bottom here, so that when the ice freezes, it can push the impurities into that water. Now to do that, we'll fill the bottom half of this cup with something that keeps the silicone from getting down there. In my case, I'm just going to use Play-Doh, but you can literally use anything as long as it's easily moldable. And so that I can use a little bit less Play-Doh, I'm just going to use this small plastic cup, put it inside there, and that will block up some of the space. Smells like childhood. So we'll fill this cup with Play-Doh up to just about where the thick part begins. Okay, so now that the bottom half of this cup is full of Play-Doh, on to the next step, which is our Christmas ornament. Now these things come in two halves, and they have this little tab at the top here that we need to get rid of. So we'll start by using a bit of CA glue to glue the two halves together, and then we'll use a file to file off that little tab. And when filing it off, don't worry, it doesn't need to be super pretty, since this is going to turn into ice, and ice is pretty forgiving. Okay, we've got our sphere, it's glued together, the tab is filed off. As I said, doesn't need to be super pretty. Now we need some way of suspending this thing inside of the middle of the cup. I'm going to drill a couple of holes in it and then stick this rod through it. Now I'm going to use an 8mm aluminum rod because I had aluminum. You really don't need to use an aluminum rod. You can use a wooden dowel or literally anything. But the rod needs to be around 8mm or so, because it's going to serve as the channel that will allow the water to freeze all the way from the sphere into the water in the bottom. So the holes are drilled, I stuck the rod through and I glued it in place. And luckily, as you can see, it doesn't need to be super pretty. The next step is to stick this thing into the Play-Doh in the bottom here, so that the sphere ends up roughly in the middle of this thick section at the top. Next step is to take a piece of fairly wide masking tape, or any other tape really, tape around the top of the cup, creating an edge on the top here of a couple of centimeters. And we're doing this so that the silicone will end up a little bit above the cup, and that will give us a nice lip to grab onto and pull it out of the cup. Now to literally the last bit, and then we're done with the mold, and that is just making sure that this thing isn't super wobbly. And to do that, we're just going to take two of these stirring sticks and tape them onto the side of the cup. And now we'll just use a little bit more tape and tape the rod securely in place. And you know what? That's it. That's literally all you need to do. This is the mold finished. It's time to mix up some silicone and then pour it in here. Let's talk about silicone for just a second. Now there's a ton of different types of silicone out there. They vary in how hard or soft they get, and they vary in how long they take to set up. Now the silicone that I'll be using, I bought here locally, but I'll leave a link in the description below to one that is very similar to this one. Now for reference, this silicone is about a 22 shore. That means that it's pretty soft and squishy. It's also a 1-to-1 silicone, meaning that you mix equal parts of A and B, but make sure that you follow the instructions for the silicone that you'll be using. This silicone has a pot life of about an hour. That means that I need to finish up mixing and pouring it into the mold within that hour. Different silicones will have different pot lives. I've also tried to cast it in a silicone that has 10 minutes. That also works, but you need to work a lot quicker. Now the benefit with that is that you can take it out of the mold within an hour. With this stuff, which has a much longer pot life, the hardening time will also be much longer. So I'll leave this stuff overnight. Okay, so let's make some silicone. I know from my first test that the entire mold will take about 750 grams. So we need half of that of each part. So let's weigh that out. So I've got a cup here and we'll measure out the same amount for each part. That'll be 375 grams for each. And that is one. Okay, on to part B. And conveniently, they're two different colors, so it's really easy to see when they're fully mixed together. Fun fact, only one part of silicone will never harden and it will be sticky on your work table forever. So we'll take our A and B, a clean empty cup, and now we'll pour both of these together in there and then mix them up properly. Okay, so here's the tip for you. Once you think you mixed it up really, really well and you're sure that everything is mixed together properly, take another cup and then pour all of this stuff into that new cup. Scrape around all the edges and make sure you get everything in there. And that way you're sure that there's nothing unmixed left in the cup. Now give this another mixing and you're absolutely sure that everything is mixed together properly. And now before we pour it into the mold, I like to whack it a little bit against the table, trying to get some of those air bubbles to come up to the surface and burst. Okay, that's it. We're ready to pour the silicone into our mold. And a little trick here is to pour from pretty high up so that the air bubbles pop on their way down, and also to pour against one side so that the mold fills up evenly. And it looks like our measurement was dead on right. Our cup is empty, that thing is full, and all that's left to do now is let this thing sit overnight and then we'll take it out of the mold tomorrow morning. Okay, welcome back. It's not actually the day after, it's 2 days later, because yesterday when I came back, the tape on the top of this thing had come off and the ball inside had floated to the top overnight. And I was basically left with something looking like this, where the ball had just floated to the top, and now I just have this big piece of silicone that I can't use for anything. So I fixed that, did it all over again, taped it down properly. This thing is now proper hard, so we're gonna demold this and see how it looks inside. And since this is silicone and silicone basically doesn't stick to anything, it will also come right off that tape. All right, now it should be just a matter of trying to work it out and have this thing come out of here like that. And Play-Doh should come right off the bottom here. Just scrape off however much you can get off with your fingers. So I've washed off the remaining Play-Doh under the sink with some hot water. Now to the last bit, and that is trying to get that ball out of there. You see now, the entire thing is just covered in silicone. So to get it out, we're just quite simply gonna use a knife and cut it out. Now we wanna be a little bit smart about how we cut it apart. Now we want to cut it just enough to get the ball out of there and also then the ice sphere out of there. And we want to cut it in such a way that it makes it easy to align it back up. So instead of doing one continuous straight cut all the way along the side of this thing, I'm going to cut it in a zigzag pattern, which will make it easier for the two halves to align back together once we put it back in the cup. So this is it. The mold is actually finished. This is what it looks like on the inside. It's nice and shiny and it's copied the ball really well. So water's gonna go in there, fill up the bowl, run out through the bottom, and then fill the cup. And just to show you why we did this zigzag pattern when we cut it apart, now you see because of the zigzag pattern, the two halves actually line up fairly easily. Compared to this mold here, which I just cut straight to show you, it's much harder to get it to line up properly when there's just a straight cut. And don't worry, those zigzag lines won't be visible on the ice sphere. Okay, it's time to put this thing to the test. So the way I've been doing this that works really well is that I'll just fill this cup with water first, and then I'll just take the silicone mold, press it in there, and just let it overflow, and then hopefully at the end, there should be water squishing out of the top here. If you spilled any, just top it off at the top here until it's completely full, and then this whole thing just goes in the freezer. Now you'll hear a lot of different theories about what kind of water to use, whether you need to boil it first, whether you need to use distilled water. I found that for me, I can just use regular tap water. I don't need to do anything to it. But if you live in an area that, for instance, has a lot of minerals in the water, it might be good to maybe use distilled water or try boiling it first. So I'm gonna go put this thing in the freezer and leave it there for at least 24 hours. It needs to be in there this long because it's insulated from all sides, and it's gonna take a really long time to freeze from the top all the way to the bottom. Okay, are you ready? I don't have a freezer here in the workshop, so I had to freeze this thing at home, put it in this cooler, and I hope that it didn't melt on its way over here. All right, let's have a look if this worked. Okay, so it definitely seems like it's frozen all the way through because the top here is popped up a little bit, and that tells me that the ice on the bottom is frozen and pushed it up. So let's try to get this thing out of here. Okay, so it's definitely frozen all the way through. You can see that ice in the bottom here. This thing has been in the freezer for a little over 2 days. Not to the moment of the truth. Let's see if this worked. Look at this thing. Look at it. It's beautiful. Oh, wow. It's perfect. I am really pleased with this. Man, look at this. It's so cool how when the ice cube is completely clear, it basically disappears underneath the liquid here. You can't see it. It's crazy. And I have to tell you, this might not have been the first time I tried this. This is actually the third. Because the first 2 times, clumsy me managed to drop that ice ball and crack it, and when it's completely clear, it's super visible. No! Ah, fuck. Oh. It survives. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So, yeah, this is literally a week later than when I said originally I was going to show you this. Also, 2 things that I discovered during this process of freezing this. One was that on the bottom here, the distance from the bottom of the sphere on the inside to the bottom here was like this much, and that was way too much for ice to manage to push all the impurities out. So I cut this relief at the bottom here, and that worked great. Also, I didn't pay quite enough attention to where I placed the ball inside of the cup when I made the mold, so the sphere shape inside here actually sits a little bit above this lip that sits against this edge, which causes the water to leak out at the very top. Now to solve this, I just used a little bit of tape, but if I was to do this again, I would just place the sphere a little bit lower inside of the cup when I made the mold. But other than that, I am super happy with the way this has turned out. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Maybe you want to try for yourself. I'll leave the link to all the products I used in the description below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. It actually makes a huge difference if you do. Please subscribe if you're not yet, and make sure to click that bell so you get notified every time I upload something new. As for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers. It's iced tea, by the way.